Well, thank you very much, and thank you all for coming here today on this important day of the International Day for Peace. Yesterday, at the United Nations, when the annual general debate was opened, the Secretary General, Mr. Antonio Guterres, said the following: "We are gridlocked in colossal global dysfunction." Just think about those words, how powerful they are. And he said that the international community is simply not ready or willing to tackle the big dramatic changes of our time. And of course, we see very visibly the crisis of the Ukraine war, a war that should never have happened, a war that is senseless, a war that is brutalizing countless numbers of people, and a war that must be ended. So these crises are at the top of an iceberg of other climate crises and the Sustainable Development Goals that all of us here are familiar with. And so we need to understand how serious the conditions of the world are today, and made more explicitly dangerous by Mr. Putin, who only today has made new and more explicit threats to use nuclear weapons in the event of a threat of the territorial integrity of Russia. Now, these nuclear threats come as Russia plans to hold an illegitimate referendums in the areas that it currently controls in Ukraine. And some people, of course, are saying, well, this is a bluff by Putin to use nuclear weapons. How do we know it's a bluff? And it's a very dangerous situation that the world has been plunged into. That's why these new and more aggressive threats to use nuclear weapons are so dangerous. They lower the threshold for nuclear use and greatly increase the risk of nuclear conflict and global catastrophe. No wonder the Secretary General is as concerned and alarmed as he is. So what we need right now is a strong global response from all parts of the world to the use, the threat of use of nuclear weapons. So this is why the Prohibition Treaty came into existence in 2017. The Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons bans the possession of nuclear weapons. 66 states have already ratified this treaty. Canada has refused to join it because Canada is currently following the NATO position. The NATO position is to oppose a treaty that counters nuclear deterrence, the very existence of nuclear weapons. So we cannot pretend that we are innocent bystanders here in Canada just because Canada itself does not possess nuclear weapons. We're part of an international machinery, the NATO, which does have nuclear weapons. And so I'm calling today for all countries and for Canada to issue an unequivocal condemnation of the use of nuclear weapons and the continued possession of them. And we need to warn about the catastrophic humanitarian consequences of any use of nuclear weapons. We need to speak out. That's why we're here. We're giving our own witness in our own ways, and we need to raise our voice and speak out in the alarming situation that we're confronted with, multiple agendas on the climate and on food, migrations, and war, and the inability of the political systems to give people what they want, which is true human security. We have a right to peace, and we need to affirm that. You are affirming it today by coming here and giving your own witness here. So never underestimate your own power and ability to communicate into the larger society around us. So as the General Assembly continues, next few days of this debate, we'll hear a lot of good speeches. But unfortunately, good speeches cannot save the world, or they don't really respond to this maximum point of danger that the world is in now. So we are here not to curse the darkness. We are here to light a candle of hope. We must maintain hope that the international system, the politicians, the governments can find a way forward. And Mr. Guterres, the Secretary General, has provided and continues to provide a way forward, because he is now in the process of writing what a document that's going to be called a new agenda for peace. This agenda is going to be presented next year, and it's a part of the run-up to a global summit of the future, a summit of the futures that's going to be held at the United Nations in the year 2024. So he wants to have the UN consider that the disrespect for institutions today needs to be countered by a positive agenda. He cannot bring the big powers into court for the way they break their own rules and flaunt against the Charter of the United Nations. But Mr. Guterres can look into the near future and identify ways to strengthen crisis management and build the conditions for peace. Build the conditions for peace. That's what he wants to do. And he recognizes that that is not only a question, it's certainly a question of getting rid of nuclear weapons and curbing the arms trade, but it is also a question of addressing the economic and social needs of people around the world, how they are suffering today, especially the most vulnerable people are suffering as a result of the extensions of the Ukraine war, which is causing a food crisis. So migrations that we're seeing are going to multiply. The world is going to have more turmoil unless we can turn the international agenda away from the prosecution of war to the building of peace. And the Sustainable Development Goals are a prime way to do that. This is not the first time that an agenda for peace has been constructed at the United Nations. In 1992, the Secretary General at the time, Mr. Boutros Ghali, issued such a document. And he said that he wanted to build a $50 million humanitarian revolving fund for emergency assistance and a $1 billion peace endowment fund. And he said this should be paid for through a levy on arms sales. The notorious arms trade that continues to go on. If it cannot stop it, can we at least tax it and use the benefits for those taxes to help alleviate the most distressing conditions that seed wars. And then he said there should be a tax on international travel. Well, international travel is dependent on peace. If we're not going to have peace, then the very structures of our society are going to be affected. However, Boutros Ghali was turned down in 1992 because they said they weren't ready for it. He was reaching too far. Well, the current Secretary General is going to go forward. But this is a time now, because of what we've learned since the end of the Cold War and the 1992 document and the prosecution of wars and now the Ukraine war. We're in the process of learning. It's very difficult for a lot of governments to seem to get this lesson, that we must move the world from a culture of war to a culture of peace, because that is not just a nice thought, a culture of peace. It's absolutely pragmatically necessary, because if we don't have it, we will not be able to survive on this planet with nuclear weapons spreading. So this has led us to a reconsideration of the idea that was first presented by the Olive Palme Commission in 1982 on common security, namely that no one is safe until everyone is safe. There must be agendas that respect the needs of other peoples and other nations for security. They put it very, very neatly. They said international security must rest on a commitment to joint survival rather than a threat of mutual destruction. Just consider that. I repeat it. International security must rest on a commitment to joint survival rather than a threat of mutual destruction. Well, this common security agenda, if we could get it built up and if we can encourage Mr. Guterres to press it in his new agenda for peace, and if we get the Canadian government behind it, instead of Canada backing so strongly the NATO position, which is a war position, the NATO position is to destroy Russia. We must get the international agenda to focus not on war, but on building peace. That is the essential idea of common security. Mr. Guterres he's operating sort of with chains around him, with the permanent members of the Security Council down his neck all the time, and so he can only go so far in projecting his new agenda. But I think he should aim, Mr. Guterres should aim for the support of important middle power countries to stand up and speak against the bullying tactics that the permanent 5 members of the Security Council engage in. So here Canada has a special role to play in projecting this new agenda. I think that the route to common security gives us an opportunity to build for a future in which the conditions that produced the Ukraine war in the first place will not be there. We must think positively and creatively and encourage our politicians, our members of parliament, the senators, everybody who's in a position of decision-making in Ottawa needs to hear the message. So I congratulate Interfaith Council for bringing us together and the constant work that they're doing, and the United Nations Association and all those groups that are part of our own society. We recognize that we need to go forward in a better way than we have in the past and put the Ukraine war behind us and build a future in which there will not be any more wars. Thank you very much.